Welcome, all pregnant families, midwives or birth workers. This is Tracy Anderson Askew, your host for the Transform Your Birth podcast, changing your mind about birth one story at a time. Each week we will be exploring a birth story through the lens of what birth can teach us. I'll be digging deep into each story so you can learn what it is that can change the way a birth unfolds. We can't control birth, but we can influence it. So listen in to find out how. Enjoy. Mel came into her birth experience after navigating a lot of life-changing events throughout her pregnancy. At 39 weeks pregnant, she realised she needed to work out how she was going to birth this baby. After doing the Transform Your Birth course, all her questions were answered, so that when she went into labour, she was able to ask for what she needed to support her through the birth process. Mel received kind, thoughtful and skilled care, and I love listening to Mel share her experience of meeting her son. It was beyond words. Enjoy this episode.
Before we begin, a note from our sponsor. This episode has been brought to you by Transform Parenting, an organisation that provides courses, coaching and community from pregnancy through to the first 7 years of a child's life. Most of the stories you will hear through this podcast are graduates of the Transform Your Birth workshop held in Canberra. Our Transform Your Birth Today course is now available to anyone, anywhere, at any time, and includes all the wonderful wisdom of this course and live weekly catch-ups when you need it with our host, Tracy. For a little taste, please accept our pregnancy gift offer, which contains free the first few lessons and some essential wisdom for pregnancy. The link can be found in these show notes or visit transformyourbirth.com.au. And now for the episode.
Hello, my darlings. It's another episode of the Transform Your Birth podcast, and with me today is beautiful Mel. And Rafa is so lovely. Oh, if you could see the video here, best looking baby ever. And he's looking pretty chilled at the moment. So if you hear baby noises, you know it's him. Thank you, Mel, for coming on, darling.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I like to, when I invite people onto the podcast, to get a real sense of their journey about how they sort of felt in their pregnancy, about being pregnant, and the sort of preparation that they did. And then we'll explore what happened on the day. So how were you feeling about being pregnant, and what sort of preparation did you do, Mel?
Well, at first I was really excited about the pregnancy. It actually came just after I'd accepted my first ever CEO job. So it was a lot in my life. I was really excited about the job offer, then found out I was pregnant. So then was kind of in shock for a little bit, but I had always known my entire life that I wanted to be a mother. And I was aware that I had a bit of a ticking biological clock. I had actually spent a big chunk of my savings when I turned 37 a couple of years ago on creating embryos and freezing them, because I was worried that my biological clock might run out. And in retrospect, having read a bit more now, I think that some of the fear about the fertility cliff when women are 35 perhaps a bit overblown. Not to say it's not important to be aware that, you know, there's declining fertility, but my experience was that the one and only time I ever had unprotected sex with a man, I got pregnant at almost 39. So we've just had a little spew.
Little pet.
Yeah. So
you had a body that was ready, willing.
Yes. So a bit of shock, but you know, I never had a moment where I didn't know that I wanted the baby.
Yeah.
I did then have a pretty tough pregnancy, because Rafi's dad, my partner at the time, who I felt I was in a very happy, secure partnership with, unfortunately followed the script that some men follow, which is to suddenly change his behaviour after there's a pregnancy, and decide he didn't want to be involved, and put quite significant pressure on me to keep the child a secret from his family, most of whom still don't know, and our mutual colleagues, because we worked in a similar space. And so I was kind of dealing with that, as well as becoming a CEO and being aware that I essentially was going to have to tell my board almost immediately that I was pregnant. and that I would have to go on leave within 6 months. So I needed to really try and establish myself in that role.
So you had a lot going on, Mel.
Yeah.
When it comes to the whole idea of giving birth to a baby, were you nervous about that prospect, or because you had just so much else going on, it probably wasn't much of a thought?
I think I had a level of, I think both of those things were true to some extent. Like I just was so clueless about what birth involved, and that was an interesting reflection. I have a very close friend who's Sudanese, and we had conversations during my pregnancy about how in her community, she'd been exposed to pregnancy and childbirth so many times, been at births, it's so normalized.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, I'd never seen a birth. And I'd even tried looking up childbirth on YouTube, and there was nothing. And it's sort of censored. You could go on the internet and look up any strange kind of porn, but you can't just watch an ordinary woman giving birth.
Yeah.
I was a bit anxious because I thought it was going to be this extremely painful thing. And I was like, oh, it sounds like the drugs aren't going to be all that effective. What drugs are there I just thought I needed to have whatever drugs I could possibly have because I was going to have to endure this incredible pain.
Yeah.
But I did also, I guess, just have so much else to focus on that it was almost like I don't know, I kind of half forgot I was pregnant some of the time. It was just, and I had this survival instinct of trying to adjust to the sudden reality that I was going to be doing it alone and thinking about financially what I was going to do. And so I just thought I just have to work really hard. And
yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And I was just in terms of preparation, I was so lucky that I've got a beautiful sister that lives close to me and close to Canberra, and a few really, really wonderful friends. I had moved back to Canberra a couple of years ago, which is where I grew up, and just being close to people that have known you since you were a child, and it just made such a difference. So I actually organised nothing at all. My sister kept sending me lists because she's got children. She kept sending me lists of the things I should be buying, and I think she eventually gave up on me ever getting organised and went and bought them all for me herself.
Oh, that's one mighty sister. So Mel, when you came into my classes then, I was also very aware that you were dealing with a lot. How did your mindset shift around the process of welcoming your baby? What sort of changes did you notice in the process of starting to get clear on how to go about managing this?
Well, I ended up, I think I was 39 weeks when I came to do the course.
Yeah.
And just grabbed his stomach. There we go, Baba. And yeah, I was getting a lot of pressure from the father at that point about him wanting to keep the baby a secret, and I'd been in quite a distressed state, and on top of that had this rising fear about what I thought was this really painful thing that was going to happen to me. And I also just, even though I had a really wonderful obstetrician, and I'd asked lots of other women who'd had babies lots of questions, but I still just felt incredibly unclear about what birth was actually going to involve. So I think that was part of the fear as well, was I kind of just didn't even know what this massive thing that was going to happen to me any moment was going to involve. And so I think the big thing for me with the course was it really just took away that I just did not feel fear anymore, partly because I'm someone that really wants to have information about some sense of information and control about what I'm going to experience. I guess most people are like that to some degree. And so I felt like I knew what was going to happen now, and I had some level of control and an acceptance of what wasn't going to be in my control as well. But I just had some knowledge and power, I suppose, and it made me, I think it was a real turning point for me in that I started to just feel like I was ready for it to happen instead of almost willing my body to hold out.
At 39 weeks, that's a really useful thing to happen, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And I'm glad it was so quick for you, because every woman's got her journey. But one of the things about the course is it does really clearly distill the path forward of what different roles are, the birthing woman, the support person. And the fact that you could make that flip so late in your pregnancy and overcome that fear is really powerful. Are you aware, Mel, of what were some of the messages or turning points in your own thinking to bring you into a space of more confidence? Is there anything you can put your finger on?
I think one thing was that you sort of took us through the whole process of what's involved in birth. You know, we went through all of the stages of labor, and before that, I just hadn't even realized how many decisions were involved. And I think I remember on the first day I came into your course sort of saying, oh, I've got a great obstetrician, so she'll direct everything and make all the decisions. You know, I don't know what to do. I hadn't even realized that actually, well, there's a whole lot of decisions you make about at what point you're even going to go to the hospital before your obstetrician's there, and then you'll be interacting with midwives. And yeah, I guess even learning about that process and all of the decisions that actually were going to be mine to make. And for me, it was really powerful when you explained the hormones that are responsible for birth as well, and also responsible for slowing down or delaying birth, like the role of adrenaline and oxytocin and so on.
Yeah.
That was so powerful. That framing was so powerful for me. Yeah, I guess it didn't mean that I could instantly get rid of all my stress and create that environment of oxytocin that I knew I needed.
Yeah.
But understanding that that is what needed to happen basically changed all of the kind of decisions I was making. I think I'd kind of thought it's this physical process that would just happen at whatever point it happens, or if it doesn't happen on time, then they'll induce you, you know. And to realize that actually there's a whole process that is about you and your relationship with your body that leads up to it.
Well, that's really interesting to hear. Those I call them performance enhancing hormones, and we want to activate and optimize those hormones because that then makes labor more manageable, and it's really preparing you for that next phase as well. But also it's an interesting comment about decision making. I think what you've described there is one of the biggest mistakes we make, and I can understand why, in terms of, you know, these people know things we don't. Over to you. What do I do? Tell me what to do and I'll do it. But we also have to remember that pregnancy and birth is not a state of sickness. It's a state of wellness. And our health professionals are beautiful safety net. I call them the safety net to catch us if we need it. But we have to bring our own level of, hopefully knowledge, but also clarity around who we are and what's important to us in this space. And when we hand over the power, then decisions get made on our behalf that may not be in our best interests or about us, because we have to appreciate that the system has its own struggles in terms of managing numbers of people going through something that isn't controllable. Like you can't just, book in surgeries every day and have that, we're going to have 2 hours for that. And birth takes what it takes and it comes when it comes. And so as a result of that, it gets very tricky for your carers to manage the huge numbers of mysteries, mysterious uteruses walking in that door, and what those women are going to need and how much care and how much support, and will they need extra help to get the baby here safely. So making decisions is really an important part of that. I'm glad you brought that up. Tell us, Mel, what happened on the day when he decided to come? How did it unfold?
So he was almost a week late, which is probably unsurprising because I was still working and, and but because I had sort of, I guess, come to that realization that I needed, that this baby wasn't going to come unless I could, or at least not naturally, unless I could try and get myself into a more positive physical and mental state and slow things down a bit and everything. I did finally sort of stop work and spend at least that week 41 nesting. It was amazing. God, it's just so true, the nesting thing. It really does just kick in. And I found also I'm quite an extroverted person, but it was really interesting for me that I had a deep need to be by myself. And I had my beautiful birth partner, my really good friend since childhood, and other people around checking in every day and offering to come over. And I just knew that I needed to be, alone and in my body and go for walks. And so I think that was all helpful. And then the other thing that I did, I was booked in to be induced at the end of the week because he was coming fairly close to Christmas. I didn't want him to be born kind of on Christmas Day. And also my obstetrician was going on leave and I really wanted her to be the one that delivered him.
Yeah.
So that's sort of a deadline and it was approaching. And a few weeks before the birth, I had started seeing an acupuncturist named Holly Brocklebank. And she was just extraordinary, and she specializes in pre and postnatal women. And I'd had a couple of sessions with her, which had really helped me both with mental and physical health.
Yeah.
And she had mentioned that she could do induction sessions. So I called her up and I said, okay, I'm 2 days away from being induced. Is there anything you can do? And she came over to my house and she said, and she said, we're going to go in with a really intense induction acupuncture session here. And 90 minutes after she left, my waters broke.
Oh, well done, Holly.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm a bit of I've worked in public health. I always look up data. I'm very analytical. I'm a bit of I want to see hard evidence for things. And I looked up acupuncture, prenatal acupuncture, and there's a very solid evidence base for what she does. And my experience was it absolutely worked.
Wow.
And it's just such a what's the word, kind of more positive alternative than having to go and take synthetic prostaglandin and all the other drugs that come after that. So it was this huge relief to me.
I always, for my women where there's pressure to go into labor, which by the way is the worst, when there's pressure to go into labor, that's the exact opposite physiology that you need to go into labor, is pressure. But I do often sort of say that it's a good idea to get some acupuncture and to work with. There's a couple of really good acupuncturists here in Canberra that are very, very experienced. And if you can avoid an induction, you do, because when you go in to be induced, that's a whole different trajectory, a whole different experience. You're in from the very beginning. You don't get much time at home, and women tend to labour better at home. So you're sort of under watchful eyes. And so acupuncture can be a quick diversion away from that path and be very effective. But at the very least, if it doesn't bring you into labour, it can promote ripeness and gets everything moving in your body and stimulated. Your meridian energetic pathways through your body are all stimulating and working and firing well. Can really
actually she had done one on me the previous week, which wasn't quite an induction, but it was like a sort of getting, it was around when I was due, and it was like a helping the body sort of thing. My obstetrician had checked me after that and said, you're 2 centimeters dilated, like your cervix is open. That was another thing I didn't know, that you can actually just walk around for an entire week with your cervix open.
The doorway's starting to
in this early labor
separate
stage.
Absolutely. Different women have got sort of different cervixes or doorways and how that kind of works, but that can be really interesting. So your waters broke at home. Now that can be an interesting experience because when waters break, it tends to bring the baby down heavily on. How soon after that did you start getting contractions?
Well, it was interesting. My experience of my waters breaking was that it happened sort of slowly over several hours.
Okay.
First couple of hours, I was actually on a phone call to the chair of my board, who happens to also be a perinatal wellbeing professional, and she's just a beautiful person who was
Yeah.
checking in on me. And I was chatting to her and sort of saying, "Oh, I feel like maybe my waters are breaking, but I don't know."
I'm wetting my pants here.
Yeah, I was like, I'm feeling something. And then I got off the phone and it was like, oh, yeah, I think it is. And then it started getting heavier and I was changing pads. And
Yeah.
eventually I was clear that that must be what was happening. I was Googling and
As you
um,
do, Googling waters breaking. Funny.
called up the hospital and they said, come in and we'll just check you out. And they confirmed, that, yes, there's amniotic fluid. And they said, so I had always, you have that imagery of the woman's waters break and they gush out in the supermarket and then she rushes to hospital. And they sort of said, yep, we reckon you'll probably have this baby tomorrow. Go home and get a good night's sleep.
Yeah.
And I said to the midwives, will it be okay if I take a sleeping tablet? And they, because I was worried, like, what if I'm going into labor and I don't wake up? And they laughed and they said, there's no sleeping tablet that will stop you from waking up if you go into labor. Take your tablet too.
Wow.
So, yeah, I had never kind of conceptualized birth as this thing where, like, when you're going into it naturally, where it's like, your waters are broken, you're going to give birth, have a good night's sleep, make a nice dinner kind of thing.
That's not how it's on TV, is it? How
No.
it's represented on the waters breaking and everybody's rushing around in. Yeah, my waters broke for my first son, and it was an hour and a half later my contractions started to come. So it's rare. The whole rushing business is just not a thing, the most part. Yeah. Unless it's happening at the end, and then the baby could be right behind the waters breaking.
Yeah.
So you hadn't had any contractions at that point?
I'd been getting, I don't know if they were Braxton Hicks or early labor contractions. I'd been getting, I had been getting contractions, but very painless and, sort of half an hour apart, like not, yeah. So, still not entirely sure whether it was actual contractions or Braxton Hicks. So I was definitely experiencing something, but not to a level that was bothering me very much. It had come and gone a bit in intensity. Like there'd been a few where it really felt like something was going on and then it would kind of calm down again.
Yeah.
So I did have a nice dinner and a sleeping tablet and got 8 hours of sleep and woke up the next morning and Antonia, my birth partner, came over and I made us pancakes and
Yeah.
the hospital had said, because they're sort of on the risk averse side, they had said, if you haven't gone into sort of full-on contractions within 12 hours, then we'll have to give you antibiotics. But I knew from the course that actually it was 24 hours. So I just said to Antonia, I'm going to make pancakes and we're going to have a big, nice breakfast in the sun. And I don't actually need to be there within 9 hours. We'll go in after we've had a nice morning.
Much safer from infection at home than what you are in a hospital.
Yeah.
It was probably a very good call. And I love how you're just bringing in these parts of the story, just being as normal as you can for as long as you can, having nice pancakes in the morning.
That was something that we both got out of the course as well, because Antonia had done it with me. We knew that it was good to spend some time at home and to be doing something that felt relaxing and felt like what I wanted to do. And because I'm just a total political nerd and I like to read the Saturday paper, I get the Saturday paper delivered, and I was even reading a bit of the paper because that's what I felt like I wanted to do. Just things that were an enjoyable way for me to start the day rather than feeling like I had to rush off. And then we went into the hospital, and I was really lucky that because I'd done the IVF a couple of years beforehand to freeze the embryos, I had taken out the highest level of health insurance. And I'm just so terrible with life admin that I had been putting on my to-do list for months. Oh, I've got to cancel that expensive health insurance. I don't need that level anymore. And I hadn't gotten around to it. And so it meant that I had the option of going private. So I'd gone private. And for me, I have ADHD, which comes with sort of sensory issues.
Yeah.
Like I have a migraine condition as well, and I get very overstimulated by really bright lights and things like that. And the private hospital, it's a very small maternity section. It's really beautifully dim lit. It's calm, it's quiet. I went in, and that just, all of that was so important to me.
Cool.
And they don't book people in for inductions on Saturdays. So it turned out that I was the only woman in labour in the entire place. So I got to go into a very peaceful space, which was nice.
That would have been very supportive of the process. So how long did it take for the contractions to really start to ramp up?
Well, unfortunately, they didn't really come on enough, like within 24 hours of my waters breaking, which was 2:30ish or so, and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They hadn't come on enough. And at that point, the hospital said, look, we're going to have to do something to speed these up, because they said you can't have too long after your waters have broken. So then they gave me the Syntocin, as it's synthetic oxytocin. So they put the drip on, and the contractions got fast then. It sort of started, like they started coming on slowly, and I was kind of sitting on a Fitball for a while and just moving around and doing all of that sort of stuff. And then they came on pretty intensely. At one point, they actually came in and said, oh, you're having 5 contractions every 10 minutes. That's actually more than you need to have. Let's turn this down a little bit.
Yeah, that's actually dangerous, because between contractions, one of the things for those listening, it's good to have a person with you who can understand that more than 3 in 10 minutes can be very hard on baby, because once the contraction finishes, the blood flow's got to return back to its normal state, and babies can breathe better between contractions. And so if they're coming too fast and too fierce, it can be quite difficult for Bubby, and they're more likely to get distressed. So they'd sort of lost track of what they were doing, were they?
It was kind of like it just suddenly went from being slower to extremely fast.
Yeah.
And I think they picked it up quite quickly, because they were coming into the room quite a lot, but
Cool.
it still feels like a while when you're the one doing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I actually, until very recently, I'm sure you would have said this in the course, but because I was 39 weeks pregnant, I probably just missed it. But I had not realized until about 2 weeks ago, when I was chatting to a friend, that the contractions you get on Syntocin are more intense than labor contractions you would otherwise be getting. So I just thought that's what contractions were, and did the breathing. And so I think one of the things that I got from your course that just was such a powerful tool was the breathing technique.
Yeah.
I would have done it wrong, because I'm someone who's done I've done a lot of yoga, and I've done breath work. And so I'm very interested in working with breath, but the types of breathing that I had learned were the big mouth breaths.
Yeah.
And so that quiet breathing in and out through your nose, it just, sorry if you're getting some baby poo audio right now.
We didn't hear it. He's letting a few things go. That's a really good point you've brought up around breathing. It's very misunderstood. In fact, for those listening, I actually do a podcast episode. Just go back through where I talk about the physiology of breathing and how breathing can be taught in ways that promote what's called over breathing, or another word for it is hidden hyperventilation. And what that is low, like big mouth breaths, big, extending the out breath, pushing out the out breath. All those things can upset the apple cart in terms of CO2 levels in your blood. So what we don't want to do in birth is to overbreathe, because when you overbreathe, you get less oxygen, not more. So, but I do get that feedback a lot, Mel. The breathing was absolutely huge when it came to managing the sensations. So it's good that you didn't know that induction sensations are heavier, because your mind obviously wasn't focusing on that. It was just, oh, well, this is just what I have to deal with.
Yeah.
What sort of
Maybe
tools?
my brain chose to forget that or something.
Yeah, it was wise to do that. What sort of tools did you use in order to manage that intensity? What things did you use to find comfort?
Well, one of the things that was really helpful is that we had talked in the course about the actual space that you're in. Is there a way that you want to scent it? How do you want it lit? And I know that I'm very sensitive to light, so I'd brought, because of having that preparation, I'd brought like a silk blindfold with me. I had spoken to the hospital about what their lighting options were. So I requested for the room to then be made very dim, and that helped me a lot.
Yeah, nice.
And I'd asked beforehand for one of the big balls to be there, because we'd also talked about the different positions that are helpful, and that was helping me to relieve that I found really helpful, rather than just being in the bed.
Yeah.
But yeah, the other thing was, you had talked about what was actually happening to our uterus. And yeah, like I said, being someone who, for me, it really helps me to feel a sense of control, to actually have the information.
Yeah.
So I knew what my uterus was doing, and the sort of balloon like idea, and that the contractions, that each contraction was helping my baby to come, basically. Like, so I tried to really focus on that. Yes. And yeah, my friend, something I'd really suggest people think about, because I was really lucky that that Antonia just had thought of this herself, but she photographed and filmed the birth. And
Wow.
so there's all these photographs of me in that initial labor stage, well, in that point where the contractions were really happening, where I was on the Syntocin. And I look like I'm meditating or something. Like, my eyes are closed. And my sister had also come and joined us. So I had my sister and my friend there. And they said the room was just totally quiet, and all you could hear was this very soft breathing. And that, yeah, and my experience of it was, I was just in my body.
Yeah.
It was very, very intense sensation. I feel like there should be another word other than painful, but it wasn't pleasant. Like, it was very intense, but it was, I don't even know how to describe it, because it's kind of different from anything else. But I did feel, I guess I'd prepared myself to be thinking about it as an experience of connecting with my baby, because
Wow.
we were both, the baby was trying to come into the world, and I was trying to meet him, and there was a point about 20 minutes in where I turned to Antonia and I said, there you go. And I said, I think I might need an epidural. And that was exactly what you said in the course to the birth partners, that 20 minutes in, she might say this to you. And Antonia was just perfect. She didn't tell me not to. She didn't in any way remove the agency I had, but she just said, okay, well, do you know you've just gotten through 20 minutes? You're doing incredibly well. If you need the epidural, they've said that it will only take 15 minutes for the anaesthetist to be here. Do you want to see if you can do another 20 minutes, or do you want me to get the midwife now? And I said, okay, let's see if we can do another 20 minutes. I ended up doing 2 hours, and got to a point where I think they said I was 9 centimeters dilated.
Yeah.
And then, Bob, might need to just pause for a minute.
Nothing like a good burp to settle a baby. Rafi's much happier now. So you were getting to the end of your first stage, and you'd put the epidural off for a little bit longer. What happened then, Mel?
So then I reached a point where I'd gotten very dilated, and I felt like I needed a break. They were able to actually tell me what the timing was going to be. I guess because of the the fact that there'd been an induction. So that was, and for me, and like a saying, I really like to know what's happening. And so it was about 10 o'clock at night, and they said, you're going to be pushing at 12:15. And
I don't know that they do know that, but anyway, that was probably a good guess, though.
Yeah. Well, my obstetrician had been coming and going. She was coming and going through the entire birth. She was sort of there every couple of hours. And I was like, wow, God, they have a really tough job. Like, how is she having any kind of Saturday? You know, I ended up finding out when I saw her afterwards that she'd actually, it's not, I don't think she does that every time. She knew what I'd been through with the father and various things. And she said, I really wanted you to have a good birth. So it's very beautiful. So she was coming in and out all day and all night. And she had popped out, and she'd said she was going to come back at sort of around midnight, and that she expected that I'd start pushing just after that, basically. So I sort of thought, oh, okay, sounds like they don't expect me to be pushing for a couple more hours. I do think I need a break so that I've got the energy to push. Had an epidural. Something that I loved was I had a female obstetrician, and I had specifically wanted an obstetrician who'd had a child herself. And I had a Dr. Sonia Hussein, who I'd say is probably reasonably young. I think she's probably in her 40s. Be surprised if she was over 50. She's had a child herself, woman of color. Like, I just think that to be a private obstetrician as a woman of color and a mom and everything, you kind of got to be 100 times better than all the white men.
Well, she was certainly giving you a lot of really kind care, wasn't she?
Yeah, she had both the skill and the empathy, which you need both.
You do. Relationships matter in birth. They really do. Women need to feel safe, loved, and supported, and it really does make a big difference.
Yeah.
So you had the epidural, and then did you start
to get a female anaesthetist for the epidural, which I just loved that it was all women around me that I felt really safe with, and I'd made the decision that for me, I didn't want any of the students to be there because I wanted to know each, person that was there. And that the anaesthetist said her philosophy is she does leave a certain amount of sensation there. So that was good as well. I didn't sort of lose all sensation, but it wasn't hurting anymore, basically. And then what I did was you had encouraged us to prepare relaxation tracks. And I had found this really great yoga nidra track, which basically sent me to sleep. And I brought in my speaker. So we had the room really dim, and we listened to this track. And I actually got pretty close to falling asleep. It was a 45-minute track. And I went into a really relaxed state and sort of was probably kind of half asleep. And we also, my sister and my friend and I and the midwife also kind of had a cup of tea. I think I was perhaps in retrospect, a little bit high on the oxytocin, because I used to work for the trade union movement, and my friend, my birth partner, said, oh, you were telling the midwife how they need to be paid more, and it's going on about how this society doesn't value the work that they do enough, and asking her what she paid and telling her it should be more than that. So yeah, tea and chats followed by a beautiful relaxation track. By the time midnight came and my obstetrician came back, I'd really mentally gotten myself ready for that extra surge of energy you need for the pushing.
And so how did that unfold for you, Mel? You'd had the epidural, your anaesthetist had been really sensitive in trying to retain a little bit of sensation there. Were you able to get into a good position for birth?
Yeah, so I was on the bed by then, but they were sort of moved the back of it up. So I was, I guess, basically sitting. And having the epidural does, of course, make the pushing harder. You've really got to work to connect with what's going on. So it was hard. Like, I was really lucky that I just had this amazing midwife who had 50 years of experience. She must be sort of in her 70s, and some of the other midwives in the hospital later on told me that every single year for the last 10 years, this midwife has announced her retirement at the Christmas party.
She keeps staying.
She does just 2 nights a fortnight, and they said, oh, you're so lucky to have gotten her, because she does
Oh,
2
wow.
and she just knew. I mean, imagine having done something for 50 years, like she just knew inside out what. So she was really guiding me on how to breathe, how to push, what I needed to think about as I was pushing, basically like you're doing a poo, she said. But yeah, so I and then she was getting me excited. She said, oh, I shouldn't tell you, but I can see him and it's dark hair. And that sort of got me being like, all right, come on. They told me that, they said, look, if you're pushing for more than 2 hours, it can start to be, the baby can sort of start to go into distress, and that's when we'll have to think about forceps. And I did get to 2 hours, and then they said, we're going to try some suction just to help. So it had reached the point where we were using suction. Next was going to be forceps. My sister was there looking terrified because she'd had a traumatic birth and it had involved forceps, and she didn't want that to happen to me. And that all of that provided a bit of an incentive, I'd say. I just pushed with all of my might, and he came out.
Wow.
And I got to watch him because of the position I was in. I could see him come out, which was just, that was amazing. And Antonia filmed it for me, and different women will feel differently about that, but I think you don't need to ever show it to anyone if you don't want to, but I think having a video, even just for yourself, of giving birth is just such a precious thing. I'm so grateful. So I've been able to now watch it from a different angle as well. But yeah.
Wow. Oh, that's a beautiful, beautiful story. Given what you came into birth carrying, and the stress of discovering that you were going to need to do it on your own, working in a pretty high-powered job, and welcoming a baby, that's a lot to carry. And I love listening to your story about the level of care and kindness and support that you had from the people who were with you, to the midwives. Your doctor was absolutely incredible, and really were able to surround you with that beautiful woman energy that was important to you, Mel, to create the right conditions for your beautiful little son to be born. Just tell us quickly before we finish up, what was it like when you met him? What was that feeling like?
Yeah, I'm like getting teary thinking about it. I mean, I was just I don't even know how to describe it. Yeah, it just felt like nothing else in the whole world mattered, I guess. Like just this moment of complete, I don't know, being like having a kind of ADHD mind and having been in this survival mode for months. And it was like my brain had just been operating at 1,000,000 miles a minute for months. And it was like suddenly everything just kind of stopped, like you're in that moment. I just think that there's nothing that could, where you just experiencing one of the most profound things, maybe the most profound moment you'll ever have in your whole life. And I felt this sort of overwhelming feeling of love, I guess, is all I could describe it as. It just, I feel like I don't know if anyone ever manages to. I feel like there are certain things in life where we don't even have the right, no words are adequate for it, I
think you're spot on. It is beyond description. And when babies land, not every woman's experience is what Mel's describing. Sometimes women's first response is, thank God that's over. Rightly so. It's an intense experience. So I encourage people not to go in with any expectations around what that's going to feel, but welcoming a human soul into the world is unlike anything you will ever do in your life, and it is a memory that you will hold forever. And I think you're right, Mel. I think it does sometimes just go beyond words. So I want to thank Mel and little Rafa, who's been so glorious, even, letting rip a nice big emptying into his nappy moment. But thank you so much for the generosity of sharing such a beautiful story, an inspiring story, a story that even under the toughest conditions, Mel, that you were under, you were able to come through that, utilizing your resources, discovering, that you could manage more than what you felt, and was surrounded by so much love and care and kindness from the people around you. So thank you so much for sharing today. And
the opportunity to share, and also thank you for what you do with the course, because it really was transformative. I think everything that happened in my experience, which including things like being overdue, having an induction, etc., I think all of the same factual circumstances could be experienced really in a really traumatic way. And I think it just, to me, is it was just so powerful to learn that lesson about that mind and body connection that we need to be into.
Thanks, Mel. Yeah, it's a game changer. It's why I keep showing up on those weekends and seeing, watching people change and transform and start to see the light and the fact that they've got something to offer this situation. Yeah. Beautiful. Well, thanks everybody for listening in. We'll have some wonderful stuff for you again next week. So thanks a lot. Bye-bye. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe and share this podcast. This episode has been brought to you by Transform Parenting, an organisation that provides courses, coaching and community from pregnancy through to the first 7 years of a child's life. It is a place where you can learn, get support and grow into your role as a parent. Why not take advantage of a special gift for all pregnant women at transformyourbirth.com.au? Or if you have children, we have a gift for parents also.